Good morning, everyone. Happy Filipino American History Month. Well, there's just doing the setup. We're happy and glad to be here and to be here with you. We are Parangao Dance Company and we're from San Francisco. So also in honor of the Philippine Indigenous Month happening right now in Philippines. So we're here to share dances for you from mainly in Mindanao. The first one is Tausog, Dugso. Manobo, Kudlong, Saluroy, you'll see here, and then courtship dance from the Kalinga, from the Yakan, and then also from Maguindanao and Tausug. So these dances we learned from various culture bearers through the research that we do when we go back home to the Philippines, and then we come back here and share with the company and of course with the public. Thank you.
Put your pinky rings up to the moon. Girls, what y'all trying to do?
Good morning. That was my intro music. That's a hard act to follow. And then that. Thank you so much. Good morning. How are you guys doing? You guys look incredibly cheery. Seeing people in line at 6:45 a.m. That's pretty awesome. We have to give a big shout out for this amazing group, Parangal. Not only do they say they're from California, but they really get asked to perform all over the world, and we are so lucky to have them here and should just be thankful that they keep spreading the word about Philippine culture, the indigenous people's traditions, stories through their amazing attire, music, and dance. So let's give them one more round of applause. If we haven't met yet, my name is Billy Deck. Let's make sure we meet at the break. Please say hi. I was appointed by the President to the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and I will be serving as your MC today, and I am just really excited to welcome all to the White House for Filipino American History Month. So thank you for being here. I have been serving the President in the White House Initiative for 2 years now. Before me are so many amazing people on the commission, and I have to give a shout out to someone who really helped pave the way for all of us to be here, among a whole group of amazing people that contributed. But former Commissioner Hector Vargas is with us today. I just want to give him a shout out right in the back right there. Yeah. And and by the way, I am half Filipino. 5 people asked me this morning. Yes, and I see you staring at me weird. It's like some don't know, but my mom is from Quezon City. So, and we're now living in Chicago. I'm not together. I did move out of my mom's house at least 2 years ago. Look at that. So, yeah, by the way, home of the World Series Chicago Cubs. Chicago. I'm totally off script right now, and they hate it. By the way, since we're doing this, I get that a lot of people are from Chicago. Who's from the West Coast? Wow, all right. Thank you. I was just going to ask that one thing, and then you answered it. How about the Midwest? Just so I know, the East Coast? Anyone from down south? Welcome. Alaska, Pacific Islands. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Any first-timers to the White House? Okay, anyone who did not raise their hand, you have to ask them where the secret gift shop is. It's like awesome before you go. This is, I mentioned my mom. Last year was our very first Filipino American History Month here at the White House. It was super special. This is so new. We're all so lucky to be here. And the gravity of it all really hit me because I brought my mom as my date last year. And, she came here, like some people in this room, with no money very early, first one to leave the family, no help, no friends here, all to make a better life for her family. And, to sit here later on her birthday, actually, last year, and those of you who were here, thank you for singing happy birthday to her. It's just really great. And I think that represents all of our moms, our parents, or you, or your grandparents, or someone in your lineage had to have made incredible sacrifices to allow us, the chance to be here. And then, of course, your hard work. So much of your hard work has allowed you to be here. You're obviously really dedicated and committed, passionate members of the community. And as much as we're about to enjoy amazing performances like that, and Apple Diab from Black Eyed Peas, where's he at? We were out last night. He'll be here, don't worry. It's just, to me, it's really about getting into this moment, enjoying this moment, supporting our fellow brothers, sisters, community members, but trying to think what really grabs you and what you can connect with to take it forward. It's about the special seat and place in this room together, and really about what we can do ignited going forward and taking it to really make good on the original visions of all those who made those sacrifices. Just so everyone knows, as a commissioner, my fellow commissioners and past ones like Commissioner Hector Vargas, we work as the eyes and ears of the president, trying to better the lives of all Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, working in the areas of civil rights, immigration, education, economic development. But this year, as the only, by the way, Filipino commissioner, so after this ends, someone better replace me, maybe 2 or 3, so that we always have a Filipino on the commission and in really all places of leadership and power. But it's allowed me to really focus on just the community. I've had the opportunity to sit face to face with the president here, talking about immigration, not just about the sort of unfair situation with the Filipino community, drawing on real situations that were separating my own family for over 20 years. And he really took to it and understood so much behind it. I was able to fly right after Typhoon Haiyan to Tacloban and get on the ground and assess the damage and help with US aid. Speaking to, unfortunately, a lot of kids, Filipino Americans in grade school, middle school, that are victims of bullying. Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders have been victims of bullying at enormous rates above and beyond all other racial groups. So I was appointed to the White House Bullying Prevention Task Force and really have been traveling quite a bit with that group, trying to fight bullying. And we have a new platform called acttochange.org if you ever get a chance to check that out and spread the news. Talking to thousands of Filipino American college students at a time. It's very energetic, very loud, but really challenging them to break out of the norm and break barriers and fight for leadership positions. Talking about my own sort of struggles, whether business school or law school or working in TV or anywhere I don't see enough Filipino Americans. Tough, but that fight is something that I think everyone in the community needs to encourage others to do in the community because there's just not enough representation. Co-leading the U.S. business delegation to Manila for APEC with the president, straight down to, speaking of business, holding business boot camps with some of the guys I see here for Filipino Americans and other groups. Really doing anything and everything to put the Filipino community's story first, front and center to some of the most important, impactful places in the world, like right here today, with 2 really wonderful people. Again, there's so many people in the audience and so many people up here that will be thanked, but 2 I really have to say did so much to actually make today happen, and I get to introduce them right now. So first is Justin Trinidad, who's an advisor at the White House Initiative of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I think many of you are probably in contact with him. And Alyssa Koh, the Senior Associate Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Public Engagement at the White House Office of Public Engagement. Please, let's give them a big hand. Thank you so much.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Welcome everyone to the White House. Thank you all for being here. My name is Justin Trinidad, and I'm an advisor at the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I'm honored to welcome you all here at the White House celebration of Filipino American History Month. It really is amazing to see such an incredible group of Filipino American leaders in government, advocates, elected officials, and community members who are carrying on very important work for Filipino American and Asian American Pacific Islander communities, all in this one single room. In particular, I wanted to honor our Filipino American appointees of the Obama administration. If you're in the room, could you please stand? Great. Thank you. Thank you all for your great work and for your service. One housekeeping thing really quickly. If there's this open seat next to you, a few people standing, if you could raise your hand and let them come in. I don't want anyone to have to worry about that. Yeah, feel free to sit. All right, thank you. So I know a number of you have come from far and wide to be here with us today, and we're so grateful that you're able to attend and hope that you're able to learn more about our issues and figure out ways to get engaged and further involved in the policies and initiatives that directly impact us as individuals and for our families. I wanted to take just a little moment to share with you what we're all about here at the initiative. So a quick informal survey. Before coming here today, how many of you have heard about the initiative? Just a quick raise of hand. Great, the majority of you all, so that's great to hear. So for those of you hearing about the initiative for the first time, our office was reestablished by President Obama in 2009 to improve the quality of life and opportunities for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders through increased access to and participation in the federal programs where we are underserved. To put it simply, we want to make sure that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, and no matter what you look like, America forever remains a place where you can make it if you try. Today's event is one of many community engagement efforts we will have this year. Some of you may have attended or followed us online when we celebrated the Lunar New Year earlier this year. And May, of course, was a month-long celebration of the initiative, as we highlighted many of our initiatives, accomplishments, and the community as part of AAPI Heritage Month. Earlier this October, we brought together more than 100 individuals from across the country to showcase innovative approaches in analyzing, interpreting, and presenting data about our community as part of our Elevate Data Challenge. And just a little over a week ago, we are right here at the White House partnering with the Council of Korean Americans to engage in fruitful conversation with experts in fields of mental health, gender gap, security on the Korean Peninsula, and more. This year's Filipino American History Month celebration not only highlights some of the most important issues and topics that our community faces today, but also is a testament of our accomplishments as Filipino Americans. From our long and colorful history as Filipino American National Historical Society's President J.D. Pataxil will speak on shortly, to the many wins after long and hard-fought battles for recognition, such as for our veterans, that have been provided by the Obama administration, and you'll hear more about those in our panels today. Looking ahead, the initiative has a few things on deck, and I want to highlight one of them that's really important. First, we're getting the word out to the community to let them know that they have the opportunity to provide comments on a Federal Register notice released by the White House Office of Management and Budget. And this Federal Register notice is about the federal government's current 1997 policy on maintaining, collecting, and presenting federal data on race and ethnicity. Specifically, the public has the opportunity to comment on potential revisions to this current policy in several areas, including the description of the intended use of minimum reporting categories. And we have a more expansive summary on our website, which we encourage you all to go to on whitehouse.gov/AAPI, including FAQs and a transcript of a call we had recently with stakeholders in the community about this notice. And OMB will release several more Federal Register notice about this in the upcoming months, so please keep a lookout out for that. So as you can see, we've been really busy, and there's still a lot of work left to do. We'll keep everyone informed through proactive outreach and, of course, on social media about our different initiatives. And speaking of social media, you can see our tag there at White House AAPI. So please engage with us today in the future through our different social media networks, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And our hashtag today is hashtag FAHM 2016 and hashtag WHIAAPI, WHIAAPI. So just a note for those of you who are in the White House for the first time, please note that in accordance with building event procedures, if you have a pink badge, mine's green, but if you have a pink one of these, you must be escorted by the White House intern at all times as you travel between rooms, including leaving a room to go to the restroom. So without further ado, please keep this in mind, and thank you all, and we hope you all enjoy the program. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Elisa Ko, and I'm the liaison here at the White House for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So on behalf of the President, I welcome you guys to the White House, and happy Filipino American History Month. I really wanted to do a bunch of thank yous and welcome you to the White House, since it's going to be one of my last few times here to do that. But really want to thank White House Commissioner Billy Deck, the White House Initiative on APIs. They've always been such great partners here at the White House and really outreaching to our community. Ben de Guzman and a lot of other Filipino American leaders who who really put this event together, and I will be remiss if I don't give a shout out to my mayor from West Sacramento, Christopher Gabaldon's here today too. And then also General Taguba is coming right down. So this is such an important month to recognize what all of you in this room and the Filipino Americans across the country have done for and have contributed in so many ways to our society. And I just wanted to, I know you all have a letter from the president as he commemorated this month, but really wanted to read a passage from his, and use his words because he's so eloquent. As we mark this special month, we celebrate the ways Filipino Americans have lent their unique voices and talents to changing our country for the better. These immeasurable contributions to our nation reaffirm that as Americans, we will always be bound to each other in common purpose and by our shared hope for the future. So really, thank you everybody for joining us today at the White House. I will have our intern show you the super secret gift shop that Billy Duck was talking about after you leave. But really, take time to go out on the Navy steps and see the West Wing and really enjoy yourself here. So thank you once again.
All right. Our next speaker is Dr. Judy Patuxil. She's a tenured professor and licensed psychotherapist who currently coordinates mental health services at San Diego Miramar College, where she also teaches the Filipino American experience, and has initiated Filipino-related curriculum. She is the lead author for the Arcadia published book, Filipinos in San Diego. Dr. Patuxil is current president of the Filipino American National Historical Society. Everyone, please, let's give her a warm welcome. Yes, beautiful.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Filipino American National Historical Society, also known as FAHM, it is with great honor that I welcome you to this Filipino American History Month celebration at the White House. I was blessed to be here last year, and I'm glad that we are here historically again in the second year, and we hope that this is a tradition from this time forward. We are so proud of this celebration at the White House and express our gratitude to President Obama, who was the first president of the United States to acknowledge and recognize Filipino American History Month. FAHM was founded by Fred and Dorothy Cordova, affectionately known as Auntie Dorothy and Uncle Fred. I have a picture, but I'm not sure if that's going to show. So the late Fred Cordova passed on a legacy of knowing the importance of Filipino American history. Our current and only executive director is Auntie Dorothy, and she has given service to FAHM for nearly 35 years, as well as service to the Filipino American community for over 50 years. Their vision and dreams of FAHM has become a remarkable reality. FAHM has learned, gathered, and documented our Filipino American history and has helped instill a deep sense of pride of being Filipino American. FAHM is the organization that first declared October as Filipino American History Month. And in the last few years, we have been very assertive in making sure that we educate the nation that it's Filipino American History Month, not Filipino American heritage. And we do so with emphasis because October, specifically, October 1587 is when Luzones Indios, or Manila men, traveled across the Spanish galleon trade and landed in what is now Morro Bay, California, in what is the continental United States. That landing happened on October 18th, 1587. So FAHM has actually put a marker in Morro Bay, which indicates that this was a historical site. We have put markers throughout the United States, most recently in Delano, where we marked last year the 50th anniversary of the Filipino farm workers who actually started that strike. And so we are dedicated to make sure that we make this history known in our country and make sure that we put markers across the nation. Each year, FAHM has established a significant theme for Filipino American History Month. This year, our theme that we established was 1946, a turning point. It marks the 70th anniversary of the 1946 laws and events that transformed the lives of Filipinos in the United States. Dr. Dawn Mabalan is our Vaughan Scholar, and she cites these significant historical markers in 1946. There are 4 specifically, but I broke it down to 5. Number 1 is the Philippine independence from the U.S. was granted on July 4th, 1946. The last recruitment of and major migration of Filipino Sakatas to Hawaii happened in 1946. The Rescission Act of 1946 barred veterans in the Philippines from receiving their GI benefits. That's why it's so very important that we get that Congressional Gold Medal for our Filipino veterans. The Luce-Seller Act granted access to naturalization for all Filipinos, had come to the United States before March 1934. With that access to naturalization, we had also the benefits of citizenship, including being able to buy property, but Filipinos also gained access to citizenship and the right to vote. And this very critical and very important election year, we need to make sure that we exercise that right to vote, especially as we vote in our next president. So again, we are grateful to President Obama for acknowledging and recognizing Filipino American History Month, and that we are here this year, and we hope to be here again next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy, for all your work in preserving and educating others about Filipino American history and its importance. I'd like to now introduce our moderator for the first panel of the day. It's a discussion on educational barriers and solutions for Filipino Americans and Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as a whole. Mayor Cabaldon, did I say that right? I'm sorry. Was the first mayor directly elected to West Sacramento voters in November 2004 and is currently serving in his 4th term. The mayor has worked on transportation, land use, air quality, and climate change, housing, economic development, all which regarded as a model for effective collaborative action. His local and regional leadership on school facilities and local programs, along with his efforts to advance universal preschool, have established him as a visionary leader for all education. I'd like to invite Christopher and our education panelists to the stage, and let's give them a warm welcome.
For his son and then for his grandchildren. I'm so proud. At one point I became the Vice Chancellor of the community college system.
Do you hear your microphone? Can you guys hear okay?
Oh,
okay.
That'll help.
If you can.
All right. So in an earlier part of
check.
Earlier part of my career, I became Vice Chancellor of the community college system, and I was so proud. I went back home to Vigan in Ilocos to tell my grandfather's family all about it. And to have them tell me about his vision for education. They said, "Oh, honey, no, he was a troublemaker. He never said nothing about education. He had to leave." So I went home and I was inspired anyway. But it was, my grandfather aside, for so many in our community, education is the animating spirit of our lives, of our dedication to our children and to our communities. It is one of the most defining aspirations of being Filipino American. And so that's why we're leading today with this panel. We're joined by a couple of very distinguished individuals who've been helping to push forward our access, our success in education in this country. But I'd be remiss if I didn't first note that we're very fortunate to be here at the White House under an administration that has done so much to advance education for all Americans, including Filipinos. Whether it is work around assuring high-quality preschool for every young infant and toddler in this country, Filipinos included. Whether it's work on America's College Promise. The President invited me to serve on the National College Promise Board, and we're meeting down the street later today, to assure that every young person, well, every person has the opportunity for debt-free community college here in the United States. to work to reform No Child Left Behind and replace it with the Every Student Succeeds Act, and to ensure better access to high-quality data for our community and for others. And with grants for things like Race to the Top to help assure higher quality education. There really has been no administration that's been more committed to advancing educational access for all and educational success for all than this one. And so we're very, very, very pleased to be here today. So I wanted to invite our two panelists into the conversation. We will have time for questions, so write them down. So I want to start with Greg Sandana with you. Maybe first you can give us a little background. We're both from the same place originally in the Sacramento area. Greg lost his way like my grandfather, ended up here out instead. But you head up the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. You're the executive director, one of the I would say rising stars, but you're already the star. And politically, really across this country. What do you think are the one or two key education issues facing Filipino Americans today?
Well, first, thank you for the question, and mabuhay, everyone. So as Mayor Cabaldon mentioned, I serve as the executive director of the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, and we are a national nonprofit of Asian American and Pacific Islander workers, many who are members of unions advancing worker, immigrant, and civil rights. And in our organization, through the hard work of someone you may know, Monica Tamarath, co-chairs the education committee here along with Rita, who will have a chance to introduce herself. And then I also want to share that I also usually formerly served as the president of the United States Student Association, an organization that represented millions of students across the country. I was the first openly gay Filipino and only the second Filipino in history to serve in that role. So I'm very excited to be here today. So I think one of the biggest issues, which I know we'll be able to kind of delve deeper in, is the lack of data and disaggregated data for education, and really for in all sectors. But there's two other issues that I wanted just to make sure are raised and are actually part of the conversation. First is the lack of resources for mental health and depression and other mental health issues, which I continue to see as a factor in putting folks into school, to prison, to deportation pipeline. So I wanted to just raise that as we're thinking about this conversation and about the lack of data, that those are the types of issues that our students and our communities are actually facing each day.
Yeah, when we say education, we are often thinking about young people as well, but also folks reentering the workforce and society from incarceration, sometimes for a very long period of time. Education also is a critical tool in terms of making that transition possible. So Rita Pin-Arns from the Southeast Asian Resource Center, you have taken a very significant role this last year in terms of working on the Every Student Succeeds Act. But tell us a little bit about your organization and your journey to here, and what you think are the key issues facing our community today.
As was said, I'm Rita. I work with the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, and we represent the interests of Southeast Asian Americans, which are the largest resettled refugee population within the United States. And so the issues that we cover not just include education, but also health and immigration. And so we represent the rights of refugees, new immigrants. So a lot of the policies that we push forward actually apply to incoming Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, as well as other immigrants to the US. In terms of a little bit about myself, just to give you a little context, I came to the country when I was almost 5 years old. So for me, this is a very personal thing, education. I understand how English language learners feel in this country based on my experiences with not receiving services. And so I push very hard in my role. So in terms of the question on what are the two most important issues in education for our community today, I would agree with Gregory and say definitely the lack of data, not just in the schools. I mean, let's think about it just from the Filipino American community perspective. You're the third largest Asian American group within the United States after Chinese Americans and South Asians, and yet when we look at disaggregated data for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in various departments, I don't always see Filipino Americans there. And that's disturbing to me. So, that's, I think, one thing that we definitely have to correct across all sectors, not just education. The other thing that I want to note is, we need to really address the issue of language access. So we know that, I think we have over half a million Filipino Americans are limited English proficient. And yet our schools don't do enough, I think, to really engage those folks in really having a meaningful way to participate in supporting their children's education. And so I think language access definitely is one of those areas that we have to work on.
So when we have the Veterano panel later on, we'll have some powerful stories, and when we bring our education panel together, we always talk about the exciting thing of data, and you both mentioned this. So maybe let's dive a little bit deeper into that one. So the U.S. Department of Education's released a new D2 initiative on data disaggregation. Why does this matter, and what do we do to make sure that this movement that you both have been so critical in getting started actually gets to the finish line?
Yeah, so I would say that the importance of disaggregated data is for a couple of things. One, it challenges the notion that we're monolithic. So we're able to kind of see the differences and the diversity of experiences within the community, and also it allows us to actually be stronger advocates when we're talking to policymakers. I think sometimes when we're lumped into the larger API community, we become invisible. So it's important for us to utilize this data, to leverage this data, and then to share our stories that match, and those experiences that match the data sets as well.
And in terms of what this means at the school level, without the data, we cannot pinpoint what the issues are within our community. Schools receive assistance from the federal government to address closing achievement gaps. So if we cannot prove that there are achievement gaps in certain areas, then those resources are not going to be allocated to the schools. So this is really an issue about making sure that we get the targeted resources that we need to really close achievement gaps. That's why the data is so important to have.
So you mentioned getting the resources to schools, and one of the fundamental ideas behind the Every Student Succeeds Act is pushing down accountability and decision-making and resource allocation to the states, but in hopes that it will reach the schools. And Rita, you've been named one of the just 24 nationwide official negotiators under rulemaking for the Every Student Succeeds Act, partly because of your leadership in this work. What is that all about? Why should we care about negotiated rulemaking for ESSA, and for the Every Student Succeeds Act? And what should Filipinos be doing in our communities to assure that promise of local accountability, local control, local resources actually translates into increased educational opportunity and services?
Well, so I think this is a really important defining moment for us, because the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was passed in December of last year, really opened the doors for more public stakeholder engagement in the schools. It's actually mandated in the law that states and districts have to consult with parents and teachers and community members and civil rights organizations to not only determine what the state plan looks like for exactly what is happening in your schools at the local level. So we're talking about the opportunity for you to really say, if my school is identified as failing under the new law, which we may have for 10 to 15 years, so think about that. Before the next reauthorization, we are going to have to live with this law for the next decade. So if you have children right now, they're going to be impacted by the decisions that are being made this year and next year. Because during the next year and a half or so, the states are going to ask stakeholders at the local level, what do you want to happen in your school, right, when it's identified? You get to determine that. So across the country, folks are, the states are releasing their draft plans. They haven't come out with their district plans yet. They're putting them out for public comment. They're asking, what do you want us to do? Do you want more after-school tutoring? Do you want more resources in terms of specialists at the classroom level? So, you know, the answers are going to be supplied by you. And so this is a huge moment for us. And I think we all need to get engaged to make sure that we know when is your state going to release the draft plan? How much time do you have to comment on it? And then make sure that you get involved in that process.
Yeah, so I chair the Jobs, Education, and Workforce Committee for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and we're very interested in this topic because it's about exactly what you said, Rita, in terms of what are the consequences if a school is identified as failing. But even if you roll it back a ways, like, okay, but what do we mean by failing? What do we mean by every student, and what do we mean by succeeding? Right? All the words that have been used. What does it actually mean? Because we've got rid of No Child Left Behind. It's no longer just based on a couple of test scores, whether you're failing or not. But now we have the chance to define, okay, what does not failing or what does succeeding actually mean? Does that include measures of cultural competency? Should your state be including things like suspensions and expulsions or referrals to the criminal justice system in part of its rates, defining whether or not it's succeeding or failing? Those are key questions in our community. In places like in California, where we're having a big debate now about how to implement the laws for incorporating Filipino American history, and particularly farm worker organizing, Philippine contribution in World War II, into our curriculum, we're reshaping from a Filipino perspective, what does a successful school system look like? And in every state, because of ESSA, that is becoming more and more possible. But as you say, only if we do something about it. And Greg, you are one of the nation's preeminent organizers. What does this mean then to really affect the kind of change that Rita's talking about? What do we have to do as Filipino communities?
Well, at first I wanted to kind of drill down on a point that Rita mentioned earlier about how overall the Asian American Pacific Islander community is the fastest growing community. But even in 11 states, Filipinos are the largest Asian American group, including California and Nevada. And so our role, not only as Filipino Americans, but this within a broader framework as APIs and people of color, is critical in not only kind of educating our folks and holding our elected officials accountable, but connecting the dots of our history of colonization and our history and struggle as people of color within our communities, and how that actually connects more broadly. And then to your point too, what I was thinking, another thing that I also thought about is the need for culturally relevant education. I think a challenge is that, like you said, we're still now trying to fight to put the history of the Manongs in our textbooks, which we know is not only a history that's integral to us as Filipino and Filipino Americans, but to us as a country and a foundation of the labor movement that allowed us to actually come together and to actually define what it means to have collective power. And so in the spirit of our history and in the spirit of our resiliency as a community, it's not only our responsibility to educate our elected officials and make sure our voice is heard, but it's also imperative, and also our call to action to not only make sure that our communities have the resources now, but our children and for generations to come will have the resources they need to not only survive, but to actually thrive in our schools, in our workplaces, in our communities.
Ooh, you're a troublemaker too. Okay. That's good.
Mabuhay.
So the part of the curriculum work that's been happening in K-12 has been because of higher education, right? It's the work that Judy, that she was just describing, that Fonz has been doing, that Dawn's been doing, that so many in this room have been trailblazing, often anchored in a Philippine Studies program in Miramar or at City College of San Francisco, many of which are under threat. Many of those programs that provide a home for Filipino American researchers depend on Filipino American student enrollment in order to survive. And we depend as a community on Filipino American students having access and then getting through the first year and all the way to getting a degree or a credential or certificate in order for our community to keep succeeding. What do you see, Greg, even both with the U.S. Student Association at UCLA and now in your role at Apala, what are the key challenges for us in the higher education realm?
Yeah, so to build off what I was saying earlier, I think some of the biggest challenges is the lack of diversity and representation of our community, especially in post-secondary education. And I think that's important to mention because it's there's a difference when, as a student, you can actually relate to a professor who actually comes from your community, has a sense of your history and your heritage and your culture, and the experience in the classroom is extremely different. Another thing I want to mention is that when I was with the U.S. Student Association, one thing that we really fought for was actually the designation of ANAPCs, Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander serving institutions. What many people don't know was that that was actually a struggle to even get designated in the first place. We actually had to lobby members of Congress, including those who are members of the Tri-Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, to actually say this is a resource that is necessary. This is something that you actually have to include as part of the broader minority serving institution designation. And once we actually fought to get that in there, we actually had to fight to actually get funding so that those institutions could actually get the resources they need to serve the students, many who were low income, many who were immigrant, many who were refugee. And so I think that is also a part of the story that needs to be told as well. And the other piece of that is also making sure that we're actually, if we're seeing this as an issue of diversity and representation in higher education, especially in post-secondary, how are we creating a pipeline of teachers and educators that starts with K through 12 so that we could actually see that in every single part of the education system?
How do you think we're doing with just on student enrollment now? I know when I was at Berkeley, we had, for a cultural night, we couldn't do the Sinkiel because we didn't have enough students for that. So we had to pick our dances based on how many students that there were. And we've made a lot of progress in some institutions and in some states. And in some states, it feels like we've been going backwards. Where do you think we are, and what can we do about it?
I think that we're in a truly, truly defining political moment. And no matter I think we see the trends that our numbers are growing, but until we actually can see an education that actually values our history, that includes Tagalog and languages that that allow other folks to kind of understand our context and experience here, there's still a lot more work to be done. At the same time, I also appreciate and recognize how far we've come, and even the fact that we're here in the White House today as part of Filipino American History Month, coming together with folks from all across the country, I think shares a particular story about how far we've come, but I think we need to continue to push, and we need to continue to see more people like us, not only coming to these briefings, but actually in the White House, in all levels of government, as appointees, as elected officials, and throughout all parts of the process.
Rita, you're seeing us as an ally, as an adjacent community. So maybe you have some unique insights about our work in education, but especially in higher education. Where do you think the main opportunities out there for the Filipino community might be to accelerate our success and our persistence in higher education?
I think, I want to add on to what Gregory said. I think we need to really build that network of mentors for the youth, especially for going into college. I think, with the Filipino American community, there's been tremendous growth. Almost half of Filipino Americans have a college degree or a graduate degree, which is tremendous. That's much higher than actually the average American rate. And so I think there's an opportunity there because, we have a lot of students still within the Asian American Pacific Islander community who are struggling with that first year of college, not just navigating, college life, but also the academic rigor of college. And I want to throw out one data point for you because I'm a data geek, and that is when you look at the remediation rates for first-year college students, Asian Americans and Black Americans are the two groups that have the highest remediation rate. And that, to me, is stunning. And so, given that we have so many folks who are successfully pursuing a college education, graduating with a degree, it's on us to make sure that those who want to further their education, have a much easier time than we did personally. And so, I challenge everyone here. How do you make sure that the future is bright for those who want to pursue it? Become a mentor. If you don't see a mentorship program, either create one, join one, do what you can to help these young new students who are really struggling to figure out how do I get a student loan, what do I do in terms of deciding what my career should be. There's all sorts of different ways that we can contribute with our own knowledge.
Great. Or if you go through America's College Promise, maybe you won't need to get a student loan in order to just get through your basic degree. I think we also in our community have some particular issues around first-year persistence, the adjustment for many young Filipinos out of high school, out of their neighborhoods, to the college experience, but also to the challenges about what your identity is that you've constructed in whatever neighborhood you're from, whether a Filipino neighborhood, a Latino neighborhood, African American, and then you arrive at college and everything is different. You are different too. It's a real challenge for, in addition to financial aid and finding the courses and getting the tutoring, just redefining all at once for many Filipino young people. Who am I, and how do I relate to all these other folks? And am I still the smartest? Am I still the smartest kid now that I'm here at Miramar College in San Diego? I was in high school. All these kind of challenges that we have to, mentorship becomes really critical to help our young people to succeed. But that's if they get there, right? So, and a lot of young people don't make it that far because of the experience that they're having in high school, and bullying in particular. And we heard Billy talk about National Bullying Prevention Month, and you've been a huge advocate on this issue, and Act to Change, hashtag Act to Change as well. So what are the ways that we should be engaging as a community in the work to prevent and fight bullying?
Absolutely. Well, bullying is an issue that hits very closely to home. Growing up, I was bullied throughout elementary school and high school. And so when I hear this question, I immediately think about those experiences and the sheer importance of, if people see something, to say something. And I think this is in particular, especially for folks that are most closest to us, even if they're family members or even our friends. And I think, as simple as it sounds, I think the notion or the idea of being able to speak your truth, but also be able to hold our family accountable, and to bring them in, to help them understand what they were saying, how they're saying is hurtful, and how it actually could impact someone's life for generations to come, is really important. So I think that is one particular thing that is really helpful to do. I think the other thing to do is to really make sure that we're not leaving things out of context. I think right now, as we're going into an election, it is no secret. It is no secret the amount of racist, sexist, Islamophobic, xenophobic rhetoric that is going on throughout mainstream and all throughout this country. And what we're hearing actually on the ground from educators and teachers and the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association is that bullying has gone up exponentially. And so the words that we hear may be words to some, but it actually means violence, and it actually means people's lives being threatened at schools and in the streets and in their communities. And so it's important for us to really understand the current political moment that we're in and the climate that's being facilitated by the types of things that candidates at all levels of government are saying. And so I think just to pin down that as we it's important for us to really identify and really push and hold our people accountable when they say something or doing bullying.
All right. Well, we got a couple minutes for questions, and we've already got one. So, sir.
Thank you for a great panel. I wonder if you could give advice about how best to advocate for education at a time of growing inequality and people questioning about whether there's a payoff for education. It seems to me that, unfortunately, it's so popular that it's difficult to get to visit the new museum on African American history and culture. And I was fortunate enough to go there. And I thought one of the brilliant things that the museum was able to do was highlight the history of African Americans in their advocacy for both education and structural social change. So I know that Greg's been involved with the labor movement. How do these things fit with our push to increase the minimum wage? How do we reduce the inequality in our country and don't make education the panacea for these major problems?
That's a great question. It may mean we don't get any more questions after that. So, Greg, it is actually really true. So, in the higher ed world, there's been some research that shows a dollar spent on higher ed in this country, at least in the university systems, it actually contributes more to inequality than fixing it, because of the structure of admissions and persistence and curriculum and everything else. So, what about the rest of the rest of these issues that we sometimes, when some folks shout Benghazi if there's some problem, and other folks say education, preschool, whatever, it'll all solve it later. What do you think about the kind of very provocative question that we've got?
Well, I think, well, first, Tony, thank you for your question. Tony was one of the first initial staff at Apollo, so I just want to give you a shout out. But I think the question is, for me, is how are we actually looking at our experiences more holistically? Because I think people say education, but well, what happens, what about the workforce and employment? What about our health and our mental health? And so I think it's important to not necessarily see these things in silos. And so one thing that I've been encouraging is how are we actually talking about the intersections of these issues and our identities? And the more that I see cross-racial work happening, the more that I see us actually having folks in education and in tech and in labor and in health actually in the same room talking about what our shared agenda is and actually what our shared vision is for our communities, there's a lot more creativity and willingness to be more open to kind of these talking points or these line items, if you will. And I think as people, we're complex. And so we can't boil it down to these simple things. We have to remember that, after I spend the day at school, I go home, but how do I get home? Is it on the bus or is it on my bike? And do I actually have a meal when I get there? All those factors play into our experiences in this country, and so they shouldn't be looked separately. So the more that we break down the silos and the more we talk about intersections, I think the better we will be in terms of addressing the needs of our community.
That's really, it's always hard to follow, Greg, but I want to throw out a number at you because I think in numbers. And that is, when we look at the workforce numbers and the unemployment rates, if you don't have a high school diploma, 30% of those who don't have a high school diploma are unemployed. The likelihood that you will be employed, or the likelihood that you'll be unemployed if you have a college degree is 4%. All right, so I think the answer for why we advocate for education is actually a very simple one. It's an economic imperative, not only for those who don't have higher education, but also for the country in terms of the support services that we are going to have to provide for all of those folks who are unemployed. So it's very, very simple, I think, in my mind, for why we have to say we have to prioritize education for the country.
Yeah, one of the key initiatives of this administration has been the Promise Zone initiative, which attempts at least to bring together housing, education, work, social services, and health, mental health, all together in a particular place. Would love to have seen, and maybe we'll still have another chance in the future, a Filipino community-focused Promise Zone application to be really powerful. I know my experience in my own community has been, you got to go all in. It's either you're doing this or you're not. And it is true that when we first started doing our work on preschool, people said that, well, okay, we'll do preschool for all, and then we're done, because that will take care of everything. We said that's not good enough, and we got to do the whole thing. So now we're guaranteeing preschool for everyone. We're going to guarantee a paid internship in a career sector for every high school student. We're going to guarantee free community college for every student, and ban the box and a set of other initiatives together. But only together do you have any hope of being able to break that cycle and use education to its fullest potential to really succeed. So I want to thank our great panelists, Greg and Rita, for their work and their contribution and for their inspiration. Thank you so much.